To be with you guys this morning and to be able to share with you and obviously to unpack the word together. I know as Daniel invited us and shared, your theme has been devotion, is that right? And I believe you're going through the book of Acts. But I think what we were told is from now and then, you pick a biblical character and unpack that character together. And that's what we're going to be doing today. And in just a moment, I'll let Josh introduce that character. But we thought it's just obviously a great opportunity for us to speak together in this and share. Josh is probably much closer to your age than I am as well. But someone I've known for many, many years, who I have a ton of respect for, and it feels an honor to be able to share together. So I'm going to hand over to Josh to kick us off, and I'll be back in a little bit.
Appreciate it. Does this mic work? Okay. Good morning. Yeah, my name's Josh. I am 23 years old. I'm part of the East. Oh yeah, I got water there. I get nasty dry mouth, so fantastic. Yep, I'm part of the East. And a little bit about myself. I was baptized in 2019. I was a Kingdom kid. For those who don't know what a Kingdom kid is, basically born and raised in ICOC. So born in Manchester, raised in the East. And so I went through, the pre-teens, teens, went to a couple teen camps, then eventually left and started doing things, And, made loads of mistakes, done loads of crazy things. My cousin's here, he's a witness to a lot of it. And then eventually, really life kind of humbled me. Things had happened where, I ended up with all these things that I built up for myself, how I was making my money, the friends I had, relationships I had, kind of just all crumbled. And I was just there with nothing, but my own thoughts. And I was at university at the time. I went to Brunel. Anyone here go to Brunel? Wow, there used to be loads of them here. Crazy. Wow, yeah. But I went to Brunel, and so I had that first year at university. I wasn't a disciple or anything like that, but that's when my world kind of came, not to be dramatic, but like tumbling down a bit. And just remember being alone a lot with my own thoughts, smoking a lot, and just things just getting a bit mad. But then I remember having, one encounter with the word, it really resonated with me, and then eventually just going through the Bible with Jack and with Dan and Jet as well, if you guys know him, and eventually got baptized 2019. So yeah, since then, life's been interesting. It's been quite a journey, I would say. I say especially this last year. But I've seen God do a lot in my life already. I'm only 23, but I can say He's done a lot in my life that I'm really hoping to share today. So funny fact is, last time I came to Central was 2019. A few months after I was baptized. It was a different place to this. And if you had told me the next time I'd be here, be to preach, I would have thought that I'd be crazy. No way. And but God said now, a lot sooner than I expected. And amen. So this is where we are. And I'm actually happy it's with you guys. I've been seeing the streams. It comes off my suggested. So I watched a couple of your services. I saw Joey's sermon. Me and my brother watched that. I know you had Johnny Slater last week as well. Was that last week? Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm happy that it's with you guys. Actually, my first official sermon. So here we are. I'm wearing a shirt. I'm taking it seriously. So yeah. So we're talking about devotion, right? Yeah. So devotion. So when Jack and I were discussing this, we prayed and we're thinking, okay, who's the character in the Bible that we really want to dive into? And we felt spiritually led to go into Jeremiah. So we're going to be in Jeremiah today. And so let's even just get straight into it. Jeremiah chapter 1. Jeremiah chapter 1, from verse 1, it says, "The words of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, one of the priests at Anathoth, in the territory of Benjamin. The word of the Lord came to him in the 13th year of the reign of Josiah, son of Amon, king of Judah, and through the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, down to the 5th month of the 11th year of Zedekiah, son of Josiah, king of Judah, when the people of Jerusalem went into exile." So a bit of context here. So the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah during the reign of Josiah. So King Josiah was a righteous king, was a good king. He had a long and prosperous reign, around 32 years. And the main reasons for this, two of the main reasons for this was, one, Josiah was actually responsible for a lot of godly reforms in Judah. So as you look through the Old Testament, there's a constant pattern of God's people, the people of Israel, constantly breaking the covenant they made with God. And King Josiah is one of the people that instilled godly reform. So in trying to remove idolatry and just really trying to return to righteousness because, he feared the Lord. And another reason for his reign is that this particular time was a bit of a lull between Assyria and Babylon's dominance. So it was a bit more of a quiet period. It wasn't kicking off like that. So Jeremiah's time in the timeline was kind of around the decline of Assyria, and before Babylon really became the full-on powerhouse that it would later become. But we will see later on, that the Assyrian and Babylonian empires were around. Egypt was in the picture as well. And we see how things escalate when Josiah passes on and when his sons and ungodly kings basically reign after. But things get crazy. They really ramp up. So let's go to verse 4. Go on from verse 4. So we see the call of Jeremiah. Verse 4, it says, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant." So first point is a call to obedience. And so first of all, who is Jeremiah? So Jeremiah is the son of Hilkiah. Hilkiah was a priest in the territory of Benjamin. So we could kind of say that Jeremiah is kind of like a kingdom kid. Like he would have grown up, would have been around, would have known of God, and he would have definitely have witnessed ministry. So he would have been similar to quite a few of us here, not everyone, but a lot of us have grown up in the church and have been around ministry and seen things and seen God work. And then from verse 5, we see that God calls Jeremiah. He calls it, in verse 5, he says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. So that's quite a high calling. When I read that and I imagine God was saying that to me, I think that is quite a high calling. I mean, imagine you were hearing God say that to you, about you. I mean, that is who God was saying that Jeremiah was. That was his identity. That was what he was made for, right? And, Jeremiah, who was a young man, he may or may not have had an idea of his own identity or wrestle with his identity, but now God is saying, before I formed you, you were predestined for purpose, for this grand purpose. How would you feel if you heard something like that? Would you feel honored? Would you be like, wow, God, wow, me, wow, yeah? Or would you be excited? Would you be thinking, yeah, makes sense, yeah, let's do it? Or would you be fearful? Would you be thinking, how on earth am I going to do something so grand, so big? Well, how does Jeremiah respond? In verse 6, he says, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young." Jeremiah, his immediate response was a fearful response. He was insecure. He was insecure about his age. And scholars say he was between 16 to 20 years old. So that's similar to a lot of you guys here, more on the lower end. But he was also insecure about his ability to speak. He probably felt like he lacked experience. He said, "You don't know how to speak." Who can relate to that feeling? Feeling inexperienced, not being ready, or maybe being in need of more time before you fully step into what you may believe that God is calling you into. But despite this, God was still calling him to obedience. God was well aware of his age. He was well aware of his lack of experience, but that wasn't a problem for God at all. In fact, God wasn't even trying to hear the excuses. As in verse 7, it says, "But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord." So God promised to protect Jeremiah and was calling him to faith and obedience. Faith, to believe that God will protect him no matter what on that journey, and obedience to speak every word that God commanded of him, essentially becoming a mouthpiece for the Lord, which is crazy. And in order to be a mouthpiece for the Lord, that takes complete surrender. It says in verse 9, "Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth." This would mean absolute surrender from Jeremiah to be a mouthpiece for the Lord. So let's put ourselves in Jeremiah's shoes just for a moment. he's a young man, so I'm sure we can all empathize here. He's a young man, a kingdom kid, and he may have had his own ideas of what he thought his life would look like. He may have had his own aspirations. He may have thought, I'm going to live out this priesthood humbly here in Benjamin. I'm going to do my thing, whatever. And see, when he was faced with this, he's presented with two options that we also face, either to go our own way or to fully surrender and go God's way. And just to clarify, going your own way doesn't necessarily mean doing the complete opposite of what God has called you to do. It doesn't mean that you're now going and sinning up the place. I mean, you can still run from God's calling and dive into things that are inherently good. So, for example, you could be going to church. You could be, serving in various forms of ministry and even winning souls. And all those things are great things. But are you being obedient to what God has called you to do? And so for myself, since I've become a Christian, I felt God, throughout my journey, it's been, 4.5 years now. I've definitely experienced God revealing glimpses of who I believe he wants me to be. And as I've matured more in my faith, I've seen more and more of that picture. I don't have the full picture, but, I'm just trying to follow the Spirit. But it's interesting because there's a subtle way that the enemy can kind of get us, where at first you believe you're following God, and then somewhere along the line, you start to try and take control back for yourself, which is what happened with me. So I work in music, media, and all of that. And I believe and still believe that God wants me here and in this space. But something interesting happened where in, my third year as a disciple, I started to think, I've got an idea now. God, figured it out. Thank you for your help. I can take from here. I'm going to be a big mogul. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to make all this money. And I'm going to be influential. Yeah, that sounds great. And I just started taking it along from there. So I was throwing events at the time. Things are looking like it was going to get quite exciting. There was labels sniffing around and flirting and that. And I was thinking, this makes sense. This is the avenue. This is the trajectory that I thought was for me. And funny enough, I actually had the opportunity to enter into a business arrangement which would really, had the potential to propel me into that kind of space, into building up a brand and having the influence that I always pictured I was going to have. But I knew that it would be compromising. I'd be unequally yoked, and it wasn't what God wanted me to do. I knew it deep down to the point where I didn't even bring it up in prayer. I didn't even bring it up. I was just praying. I was like, God, help me with this. Thank you. Yeah. And I was like, amen. See ya. And I'll get on with this business negotiation or whatever. And so that was getting dangerous. I'm sure you guys can all see how dangerous that's getting, because at this point, I'm clinging on to this ambition that I had, and I'm now slowly removing God out of that picture. So essentially what happened was last year, I had a spiritual experience. That sounds mysterious. Wow. Ooh. Yeah. I had a spiritual experience. I had a vision. It sounds crazy. Very, very true. Yeah. I had a vision where, and by God's grace, it was in the midst of my own sin. Yeah. That this vision just slumped me differently. Yeah. And to the point where I fell on the floor and I was in prayer. I was in pure reverence. Like, this is crazy. And essentially what God was showing me was everything I could have been at that time if I wasn't lukewarm. And I was seeing a lot of things. It was like a montage. It was really, really intense. And I remember one of those things that really stood out to me was essentially I was being called to that all these dreams and ideas and aspirations I had for myself at that point had to die. There and then had to die. And that's not easy. It's not an easy thing. And it's even the journey since then, getting to this point, from that experience to now, has been a lot of growth and a lot of amazing things happening. In fact, I've even seen things in that vision come to pass now, which is crazy. And but it still poses the same question. What in your life needs to die? And I know it sounds dramatic, but if Jesus is Lord, like many of us here have said, then we must be ready to respond to the call. And God made us, so he knows what we're made for. So let me ask you, what's been tugging on your spirit? Has anything that's been tugging on your spirit? You know, what are you potentially ignoring? I was ignoring things for a long time. And that's why me trying to make certain things happen in music felt like dragging a bin bag of bricks up the stairs. It was just getting long. It was getting tiring. It was getting tedious. And I felt like I was just putting all this energy into places where it was better spent elsewhere, in places that would be edifying. And, you know, is there anything that you're holding on to that you need to let go of? You know, it could be career, relationships, you know, friendship or romantic relationships. It could be whatever the culture tells you you're supposed to aspire towards. I mean, is Jesus Lord? Is the culture Lord? Is whatever the culture tells you, is this what you're following? You know? Because the culture is very persuasive. I mean, if you, honestly, you stop reading your Bible for a week, yeah, and you just go and walk out the street and you come back, the world has dragged you back. You know what I'm saying? Just everything, it's all in your face. It's mad. I was at the gym and I heard some song and I was like, what is this demonic sound? It was Doja Cat, it was that song. I was like, what is this? I was like, what on earth is this? Anyway, I didn't actually plan to say that. But yeah, so the culture is really something that we need to address and be serious about. And when it comes to your purpose and all these kind of things, like, you know, what you feel like you're being called towards. I mean, I have an analogy that I often use, which kind of illustrates what my mindset was. And it's like, imagine God had called you and he said, your purpose is in water, to do with water. And you go to the beach and you see the water. You know, the right thing to do, I guess, would be to ask God, okay, what do you want me to do now, Father? Spirit, lead me, show me where you want me to go. But instead, someone like me back then would be like, I got it. I'm going to be a lifeguard. I'm going to be the littest lifeguard. I'm going to have social media presence. You know, I'm going to save people's lives from drowning. I'm going to pick them up, then I'm going to baptize them and pull them out, and I'm going to save lives and souls and everything, yeah? And then, you know, I could go and do all of those things. That could be great, yeah? And then, you know, and I could probably go and have a whole career as a lifeguard, but then that might not have been what God had been calling me to do. What if God was saying, no, I'm going to put you in a boat and you're going to go further out. You're going to go deeper. And that whole area, that whole part of the ocean is which would have been edified by me being there and being used, has not occurred because I've been so desperate to keep a hold of my life and keep a hold of my destiny. And that's another thing the culture says. You write your own destiny and all that. Yeah, write your own, all of that. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so are you the author or is God? You know, Jeremiah's calling was not easy. And sorry, other question, is God's will important to you or is your own will more important? That's a tough question. I mean, we can all say yes. I would say yes, yeah? And then I'd realize that it's not a yes. Because realistically, yeah, if certain things are challenged and there's certain things that I want to hold on to and I'm just not willing to let go, then that's an idol. That's not how you put that before God, just like that. And it could be anything. It could be so subtle. It could be something that's inherently good. But at the end of the day, if there's things that stop you from following God's voice, then you have to say how it is. That's stopping you from following God's voice. See, verse 10, yeah? He said Jeremiah's call was not going to be easy. And it says, see, today I'll appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. That is, while there is some message of hope in that, there was also quite a difficult task there. He was going to be preaching a message that was not going to be received well. In fact, he was going to have his life threatened, and it was not going to be, you know, a smooth journey. And Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. If you read through it, you'll understand why, because I'd be weeping. And he went through a lot. But at the end of the day, Jeremiah was surrendered, and he gave his life fully to God, surrendered to be God's mouthpiece according to his will and not his own will. But yeah, I'm going to swing it to Jack.
Fantastic. Josh, thank you so much. That was very, very powerful, and I think set up very well for the second point. As we discuss kind of the role of Jeremiah and what he was even called to. And I think much of what Josh has shared there is really kind of one of those things that just massages the heart. You know, just in you, it's a good test for us of where we're really at before God. And I want to ask you a couple of questions, even just about Jeremiah really quickly. if when you think about the book of Jeremiah and the story of his life, if you consider 10, I've got like fantastic intimate knowledge. I know it hands down in and out. Versus 1, this is completely and utterly new to me, the book of Jeremiah and his story and everything else. Where are you right now? Any 10s? Any 1s? Some 2s and 3s? What's the average? Are we like 2s and 3s, 4, 5, 6s, 7s? Anyone a little bit more familiar? See, Jeremiah is a really interesting prophet. It's one of the longest books of the Bible, one of the longest prophets as well. But does anyone know what Jeremiah's message was? Like actually specifically what he was called to communicate to people. Do you know? Anyone? That's why I asked if there were any 7s or any 10s. So what Jeremiah was called to, his message, and why he was the weeping prophet, his message was not a positive, wonderful, joyful one. When he was called to be a prophet to the nations, but a prophet specifically to Israel, to God's chosen people, much of his message was judgment is coming. Like wrath is coming. And the Lord Jeremiah describes how Babylon is going to be my chosen instrument to bring justice upon you, Israel. Upon you as my chosen people, you're going to be judged. So let me ask you a question, okay? Imagine you're Jeremiah. This is why I want us to really try and connect with this as best as you can. You're Jeremiah. You're around this age. You're a student right now, and you are called by God. You feel like you get a really clear calling. You are going to go and tell to people, whether they're God's people, the church, or others, judgment and wrath is coming, and there is nothing you can do about it. How do you think people are going to respond to a message like that? Woohoo! Do you think it's going to be great excitement and great joy? No, that's one of these, like, this is a heavy message. This is one of these things, wow, this is challenging. Basically, the Israelite nation just got to a point where they looked like all the other people around them. They were engaging in idolatry, engaging in wild practices, oppressing the poor. They were being horrific in so many ways. And God's justice had just got to a point where I have to bring judgment upon these people. And he calls this young Jeremiah, you're going to be the guy that's going to go and speak to my people and point out to them their flaws and their mistakes and the things that they've been doing. It puts it, so now, why is this so important? And honestly, even when we wrestle with sharing a story like this, because I think it's so much easier to present, especially at your age, to present some other characters in the Bible who had much more there were some challenges, but much more of a joyful, wonderful arc, and it ended in such a great place, and it was fantastic. Because I think when I was younger, I became a Christian at 20. I was studying philosophy out in Reading University, and I became a Christian there. And I moved to the East London in 2013. But I think when I first became a Christian, the level of excitement of thinking, oh my goodness, like I can partner with the creator of the universe. Like I get to know his word. I get to have a relationship with him. I can be his hands and feet in this earth. That's incredible. It's exciting. And you start to imagine, what could that look like? What wonderful, great tasks might he have me do? And you can start to imagine the like exciting, adventurous journeys you can go on. And especially at this age, as you're in student years and you think of the decades ahead and all the wonderful, amazing things that might happen. And imagine being Jeremiah, where you say, listen, for the next couple of years, probably a couple of decades, it's going to be pretty tough for you. You're going to be warning God's people about a coming wrath that there is no escape from. Have fun. That's challenging. That's scary. And that's where it really tests the heart. Because it's one thing to say, hey, I've got this awesome adventure for you and you're going to climb mountains. It's going to be glorious and you're going to be doing these wonderful tasks and you're a little bit scared and it requires some change and you've got to step out your comfort zone. But you're like, wow, that sounds like really awesome, adventurous. And then you've got another one where it's like, I'm laying before you a path of suffering, a path of sacrifice. I'm laying before you some really challenging things are going to come ahead of you. The temptation is then to be very avoidant of anything like that and say, I'm not too sure about that. I've got a better idea. How about a little bit of that stuff and more of this stuff? And this is kind of what Josh is saying. It's so easy for us actually to be religious and to do the God thing and to take the name of Jesus, but we take a little bit of that, but then really it's our will driving most of it. Because we don't like the idea of what God could call us to and what that path of suffering could actually look like. Any of you familiar with this as well? If I were to mention a language, this is a weird phrasing, but prophetic allegory. Do you have any idea what I mean? Think about it like this. there's some things, often in times the prophets are called to use their lives and actually put their lives on display as an example to God's people. Anyone are familiar with the prophet Hosea? Anyone know what Hosea was called to do that was pretty challenging? What was he called to do? He had to marry a prostitute, okay, who abandoned him, committed adultery and left, and then he had to go and seek her and bring her back. And why did he have to do that? You know? That's how he felt about his people. See, your life is going to be this example that my people continuously keep being adulterous and keep going astray and keep disobeying. And I want your life to be on display to show them how much I love them. And that I'll keep seeking them and I'll keep bringing them back and I'll keep pulling them in. And there's a romance to that, and it's wonderful, but it's painful for the prophet and for the one who's using their lives, as Romans 12 talks about, as a living sacrifice. It's not easy. In fact, I won't dive too much into the story of Ezekiel, but if you're familiar, some of his stuff, he's called to lay on his side. I think it was like either 390 or 420 days to lay on his side. It was like, you're going to lay on your side for every year my people have been in sin, and that was going to be his example. Another thing, this is a bit gross, okay, but this literally happened. He was called to, so he was called to bake bread and cook food. Anyone know over what? Over poop. Yes, he was using human dung to fuel the fire to cook his food. It's disgusting, isn't it? Sorry. But this is what the prophet Ezekiel was taught to do, to show his people that these are the kind of things that are coming. This is what your sin looks like to me. And this is what Jeremiah was called to. See, Jeremiah and some of the things he was called to do, it was not marry and not have children, because the people of God are about to go into exile. He was beaten. He was locked up in stocks. He was put in prison. He was thrown into a cistern and left for dead. He basically had a journey of preaching for 40 years, and still at the end of those 40 years, the people went into exile and he joined them in exile. That was kind of this journey of Jeremiah. So as you, I see some heavy faces. As you pause, and let's be honest with ourselves, just reflect for a second, how does that make you feel? If you think about that. And we see Jeremiah's wrestles. There are so many times he wrestles. In Jeremiah 12, he wrestles with the goodness of God. He wrestles as he sees wicked people prospering, and he sees himself who's devoted himself to, and he's suffering, and he's going through difficult trials. And he's asking these questions, why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the faithless seem to live at ease? And he's got this painful wrestle. In Jeremiah 14, he wrestles with this false message, this message he's got, and all these false prophets around him keep prophesying the complete opposite. And they say, no, it's going to be fine, and we're going to escape, and everything's great. And so he's getting persecuted by his own people over and over again. And he's facing hardships, and he's facing suffering, and all of these types of things. And honestly, as I share this message, I'm like, man, how do you share this in a lighthearted way? And even I said before, sharing this with a group of younger students, and we wrestle with why and what this message to share. And even as I thought about, even for my own life, and I thought about why I think a message like this is so helpful for all of you, is because with a message like this, I wrestle with God's goodness. I wrestle with his character. I wrestle, honestly, the biggest thing I wrestle with, just a fear of what is God going to ask me to do. And honestly, even now as a parent, way more. I'm like a fear of the future, what's going to come, what my kids have to endure, what might I be asked to do. And it's so easy for fear to get in and for us to just start to dilute the message a little bit. And I highly doubt, and I hope and pray, any of our lives will look quite like Jeremiah's. Okay? Just to alleviate. Now, but I can't make any promises. And it's that thing it's that challenge of, am I really willing, if that was my journey, am I really willing for that to be my calling? Am I that surrendered to God? That whatever his plan might be for me, that wherever he might call me, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes. That tests the heart. That really challenges us. And I think to loop back to you guys, and even for myself, I grew up in a pretty broken home. So I never have known my dad, and maybe a little bit of a challenging relationship with my mum at times as well. No other siblings, and like life wasn't particularly easy. There was like many challenges at different points. And then I think when I became a Christian at 20, and I was very opposed to anything that like smelled like religion at all, right? I was studying philosophy. I used to love going and like arguing and debating with the Christians. I'd go to like Christian Union events at campus and just argue with them and ask them really difficult questions and try and disprove the God of the Bible, okay? I was that guy. Okay, I was very difficult to have any kind of conversation with. You'd have invited me to church or a Bible discussion or anything else, and I would have just laughed or argued with you or something like that. All right, that's where I was at. But I think when I then first started opening up my heart and mind to maybe this is true. Okay, maybe I haven't got this all figured out, and maybe I've been a little bit blind to some of this. And I first start coming to church, I first start visiting, I start coming out, and I start to get a picture for what God is trying to do in people's lives. I start meeting people, and I remember just hugs people would give me. I remember those first relationships and connections and people I would meet, and I remember seeing the beauty of it and realizing, wow, there's something special about this people. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, but these people have something. There's something going on here that I can't quite explain in my current worldview. And I have realized over time, God is alive and present and working amongst these people. And I remember when I first becoming a Christian and devoting my life and deciding, this is it, I'm all in. I'm going to be a disciple of Jesus. This is what I want. I'm going to give my life over to him. I'm going to let go of my hopes and my dreams and my ambitions and everything else. And at 20 years old, that was me. I became a disciple and was staying in campus there, finished off my years at university, and then graduated in 2013, like I said, moved to East London. But here's the thing even about God's people. And in Jeremiah, who was he called to speak to? He was called primarily to speak to Israel, as well as to speak to all of the nations. He had this dual kind of prophecy. And I think whilst we are so blessed and so grateful for God's incredible kingdom, if we enter in with expecting perfection, then we're only ever going to be heartbroken and disappointed. And I think, and this is why I'm going to preach to you guys a little bit here, and I'm going to challenge you directly. Is that okay? Can we have that? You are Gen Z, is that correct? Are any millennials here? Are you a millennial? Me too, bro. Josh, you're a millennial. So, like, soon I think to you, the millennials will seem like boomers, okay? And we're going to be this old, dying generation. But something I think our generations share, I think we have this real pain avoidance. And something that happens in our society, in our culture today, just cancel culture. This idea of like cutting people off, like leaving this environment, like disappearing. That we have this thing, we're a little too flighty, our generations. That when things get a bit tough or a bit challenging or it's not quite going our way, it's very easy just to disappear and abandon. And that's it, even with community. The one thing you can guarantee with church as you come into a spiritual community is God is present. God is working, He's alive and active, but you are absolutely engaging with other broken, sinful people. And you are bringing your own issues and your own baggage and your own brokenness into it. And I say this because even now as you're in campus years, but even afterwards as well, part of being devoted to God and devoted to His body and devoted to the world is, you're going to have to be devoted to people who essentially are broken in the same way that you are. And you will be hurt, and you will experience pain, and you will experience suffering, and you will experience challenges and difficulties and trials. And you will wrestle with, where is God in all of this? Why is this happening to me? Why is this so hard? What is going on right now? And I think it's good for you to hear a message like this at this point, knowing you maybe have already had some of those times, but some of those times might come. And what you need to be able to develop as well, and this is it's a resilience. It's a strength, it's that fire, it's that steel in your spine, that fire in your belly, a resilience to know, you know what, no matter what comes, I know God is with me. I know His word is true and reliable. I know wherever God guides, He provides. So no matter what the challenge is, no matter what the difficulty is, He is still Lord, He is still good, He is still walking with me. And ultimately, even as I talk about prophetic allegory, and I'll finish here in 1 Peter, one of the pinnacles of Christianity and what we looked at today is the crucifixion. And I think an empty meaningless message is when we talk about the prosperity gospel. And this idea that you become a Christian and everything's going to be fantastic. And God is good and life's going to be awesome. He's going to bless you and you'll be rich and it's going to be fantastic. And there's parts of that which are true, but the truth is we serve a suffering servant. We serve a Lord who died for us and calls us to follow his example. In 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21, it says, "To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed, for you are like sheep going astray, but now have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls." This is the Jesus, this is the Lord we serve. And I think one of the things I'm incredibly grateful for is that God has never abandoned me. Even when things have been difficult, there have been challenges or trials, he's always been there. He's always been present. He always perseveres. God is perfectly and consistently loving. And I'm grateful for the brothers and sisters and people in my life who have stayed with me when I've been really difficult to love. I'm grateful for the people that reached out to me when I had no interest in knowing God and persevered. I'm grateful for the people that were patient when I was difficult with them, consistent to love, those who I sinned against and they forgave me. I'm grateful for the fact that even if or when it gets challenging, God never abandons us or forsakes us. And the wonderful thing about Jeremiah is even as challenging as a book it is, and as challenging as a prophet he was, the book ends with such a wonderful positive note. It ends with this final hope. See, in Jeremiah 31, it talks about, he gives Jeremiah hope, saying, one day your descendants will return. He gives them this hope, knowing there will be a day where the people will come back to the land, and they will once again experience this peace and unity. And at the very end of Jeremiah, even in the kingdom of Babylon, even in the midst of all this sin and destruction, we see this note of hope at the end of that message, which the king of Israel is invited to dine at the table of Babylon. He was shown favor. He was given grace, even by this wicked king, basically. And all of it does is it continues to point forward to a future day. It continues, obviously, for that to point forward to Jesus, but for us today to point forwards to ultimately being with God in the kingdom of heaven. It points forward to actually what is really important and really matters in life is knowing God, knowing our Creator, walking with him, and one day being with him for all eternity. So I hope today that this message doesn't leave you with a sense of heaviness. I wanted to present the truth clearly and plainly to you because I don't want you to go into our world with rose-tinted glasses. Rah, 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 everything's going to be fantastic. But to realize, no, there's going to be some difficulties and challenges, but God will always be with us. And I think I love what Josh shared, and I want to leave you with that as well. Where there's maybe that tension in your heart, and these kind of things can really sift out our hearts about what other mixed motives are in there. Where do I find it difficult to actually just let go of my will and my plans and to actually figure out, God, maybe you are way better than I am, and maybe your plan is far better than mine ever could be. And to actually let go and surrender. So for you today, think about what is that for you that maybe you need to be able to let go of and put before the feet of God so that you can be wholeheartedly devoted to him and surrendered to the journey of life he has planned for you, which I can guarantee you is far better than anything you've currently got in your minds of your own plans. So thank you so much for having us here today. It's been a joy to share with you. I look forward to getting to know you more in the fellowship as well. Thank you.